What are you up to right now? Maybe you're driving home, finishing up some work, or just settling in for the night. Whenever you feel the need for a story that truly makes you feel something, that's when you found us. Get ready for a journey. We like to believe we have some measure of control over our lives. We plan. We prepare. We build safe little fortresses in our homes, convinced that we can anticipate the monumental moments that are heading our way. We lay down the blankets we call the experts. We tell ourselves we are ready. But every so often nature, with its ancient and unknowable wisdom, decides to remind us that we are merely guests here. It reminds us that the most profound events are not the ones we plan for, but the ones that arrive unannounced, carried on the winds of a gathering storm. For the Miller family in the quiet rural town of Havenwood, Ohio, that storm was rolling in on a thick, humid summer night. The air was heavy charged with the kind of electricity that makes the hair on your arms stand up. Outside, the great oak trees at the edge of their property were beginning to sway their leaves, whispering warnings to one another. Inside, a different kind of storm was brewing. Their living room, usually a place of chaotic, happy clutter. Schoolbooks, dog toys, half-finished cups of coffee had been transformed. It was now a sterile, quiet space, a makeshift maternity ward. In the center, on a nest of old quilts and clean towels, lay Sadie. Sadie was a golden retriever who seemed to be made of pure sunshine. Her coat was the color of deep honey, her eyes a soft, intelligent brown. But tonight, that light was dimmed by a primal anxiety. She paced a small circle, her paws making a soft clicking sound on the hardwood floor, before she'd collapse back onto the blankets, her sides heaving. A low whine would escape her throat, a sound that tore at the hearts of the three humans watching her every move. David Miller, a man who assisted veterinarians for a living, was supposed to be the calm one. He'd seen 100 births. He knew the clinical signs, the stages, the procedures. But this was different. This wasn't a patient. This was Sadie the dog who had laid her head in his lap after the worst days of his life. He found himself checking his watch constantly, his professional calm cracking under the pressure of being a father-to-be one step removed. His wife Sarah, a school teacher with a boundless well of patience, knelt by Sadie's side, stroking the soft fur behind her ears. "It's okay, sweet girl," she whispered, her voice a steady anchor in the tense room. "We're right here with you. You're so strong." And then there was Leo. At 10 years old, Leo saw the world in a way adults had long forgotten. His bond with Sadie was something pure. He didn't see a dog in labor. He saw his best friend in pain. He was lying on his stomach near the nest, his chin propped up on his hands, whispering his own stream of encouragement. "You can do it, Sadie," he'd say. "You're the best girl in the whole world." Earlier that afternoon, in a moment that seemed utterly insignificant, at the time Leo had burst through the back door, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad, I saw a red dog by the woods. It had a super bushy tail, and it was watching us." David, busy sterilizing equipment, had simply ruffled his son's hair. "Probably just a stray fox, buddy. They stay away from the house. Nothing to worry about." It was a parent's automatic response. A simple, logical explanation to dismiss a child's flight of fancy. None of them could possibly know that this wasn't a throwaway moment. It was a prologue. A single, crucial puzzle piece that had been laid down hours before the puzzle had even been revealed. They had dismissed it because why wouldn't they? The idea that a creature from the wild world, beyond their backyard, could have anything to do with the miracle about to unfold in their living room was unthinkable. As the first fat drops of rain began to splatter against the windows, and a distant rumble of thunder echoed across the fields, Sadie let out a sharp cry, and her body tensed. It was time. The air in the room grew thick, every breath held in suspension. The Millers leaned in their world, shrinking to the small sacred space on the floor. They thought they knew what was coming. They had prepared for puppies. They had prepared for the joy, the mess, and the magic of new life. But they hadn't prepared for a secret. They hadn't prepared for a visitor in the night, for a desperate act of maternal instinct that had already happened right under their noses. They were about to learn that the heart of a mother is the wildest place on earth. And they were standing right at its edge. The first cry of a newborn is a sound that cuts through any storm, inside or out. It's a sound of pure, unadulterated life. And for the Millers, it broke the tension in the room like a lightning strike of pure joy. Sadie, with a final deep groan, delivered her first puppy. It was a perfect squirming little male, his fur as golden and wet as his mother's. A collective sigh of relief washed over the family. David's clinical anxiety melted away, replaced by the simple, overwhelming love of a pet owner. He quickly checked the pup over his movements, swift and sure. "He's perfect, Sadie," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." Within the hour, 3 more followed, each one a tiny, beautiful echo of their mother. The whelping box was now filled with the soft sounds of mewling and the sight of 4 healthy puppies blindly nudging their way towards their mother for their first meal. The storm outside could rage all it wanted. Inside this little haven, a miracle had unfolded just as they had prayed it would. Sarah was smiling through tears, and Leo was practically vibrating with excitement, already trying to decide on names. They had made it. The worst was over. Or so they thought. Just as David was about to get a warm cloth to help Sadie clean up, he saw her body tense again. A wave of contractions rippled through her. He froze. "Wait," he said, his voice low. "There's another one." This wasn't entirely unusual. Sometimes a litter is larger than you expect. But as this new life began to emerge, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The joy faltered, replaced by a thread of confusion. This one was different. It was noticeably smaller, and its wet fur wasn't golden, but a dark, dusky brown with a strange reddish tint. As Sadie nudged it, it let out a cry, but the sound was higher, sharper, almost like a bird's chirp. Sarah leaned closer, her brow furrowed. "David, why does it look so different? Is it a runt?" David didn't answer. He was staring, his mind racing. A runt would be smaller, yes, but its features would be the same. The snout on this creature seemed more slender, its ears pointier even at this fragile age. Then another contraction, and a 6th newborn arrived, just as small and dark as the one before it. And then a 7th. The nest was now a strange mix, 4 bright golden puppies, and 3 small, dark, and unsettlingly different siblings. And as the last one settled, David noticed something that made the blood run cold in his veins. Each of the 3 dark newborns had a distinct, unmistakable white tip on the end of its tail. The professional in him kicked into overdrive, searching for a logical explanation. His first thought was heteropaternal superfecundation, a rare but possible phenomenon, where a single litter can have multiple fathers. Maybe a stray dog had gotten to Sadie, but he dismissed it almost instantly. No dog breed he knew of stray or otherwise produced offspring with this specific morphology, this unique coloring, this wildness. He had seen thousands of puppies in his career, from purebreds to the most unique mixed breeds. And these were not puppies. He could feel his family's eyes on him, waiting for an answer, for reassurance. But he had none to give. He was a man of science and medicine, a man who dealt in facts and certainties. And in that moment, kneeling on his living room floor, he was completely and utterly stumped. The greatest mysteries he was beginning to realize don't happen in faraway labs or ancient ruins. Sometimes they are born right in front of you, in a tangle of blankets and warmth, forcing you to stare into the face of the impossible. The miracle of birth had happened, but it had brought with it a silent, terrifying question that now hung in the air, heavier than the storm outside. If they weren't puppies, then what were they? Dawn has a way of promising clarity. After a long dark night filled with confusion, the first pale rays of sunlight often feel like a sign that answers are coming, that everything will make sense. As the grey morning light filtered into the miller's living room, it illuminated the strange scene on the floor. A beautiful golden retriever. 4 golden puppies and 3 tiny, dark, mysterious strangers nestled among them. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean. But for David, the storm in his mind was just beginning to rage. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the night watching them, his veterinary textbooks running through his head. He'd replayed every possibility, every genetic anomaly, every 1 in a million mutation he'd ever read about. But none of it fit. The truth he suspected was far stranger than anything science could easily explain. With a deep breath, he reached gently into the whelping box. Sadie watched him, her brown eyes soft but alert, a low rumble in her chest warning him to be careful. "It's okay, girl," he murmured, his hand steady. He carefully lifted one of the tiny dark creatures. It was so light, its fur surprisingly coarse compared to the puppy's downy fluff. He held it in the growing light, his heart pounding. He wasn't just a vet tech anymore. He was an investigator at the scene of a miracle or perhaps a tragedy. He gently used his pinky finger to open the creature's tiny mouth, tilting its head to see the gums and the palate. And that's when he saw it. The confirmation. The sharp, distinct shape of the teeth that were just beginning to emerge, the narrowness of the jaw. It was a pattern he'd seen before, but not in a creature born in a living room. He'd seen it in the wild. He looked up at Sarah and Leo, his face pale. The words felt heavy, impossible, as they left his mouth. "They're not dogs," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're foxes." Silence. The only sound was the gentle suckling of the puppies and the rain dripping from the eaves outside. Sarah stared, her hand flying to her mouth. Leo's eyes went wide, not with fear, but with utter fascination. And suddenly, it all clicked into place. The puzzle pieces from the day before slammed together with breathtaking force. "I saw a red dog by the woods." Leo's excited voice echoed in David's mind. The bushy tail, the storm. They pieced together the story, their voices hushed with awe and a dawning horror. A mother fox, a vixen, must have been caught in the storm. Frightened, perhaps injured, maybe even dying, she had sought shelter. And in a final desperate act of a mother protecting her young, she must have found the one place that signaled warmth, safety and nurturing. She hadn't just abandoned her kits. She had delivered them to the steps of a church, the only one she could find. She had given her babies to another mother. The revelation crashed over them, and with it came the central conflict that would tear them apart. Sarah's maternal instinct immediately went into defense mode. "Foxes," she gasped, pulling Leo a little closer. "David, they're wild animals. Will they hurt the puppies when they get bigger? Will Sadie? Will she get sick?" But Leo, pure-hearted Leo, saw no danger. He only saw babies. "Wow," he breathed. "Sadie has secret puppies." David was caught in the crossfire. His training screamed at him about the dangers of rabies, parasites, the unpredictable nature of wild animals. The law was clear: you don't keep wildlife. But his heart, watching Sadie lick one of the tiny fox kits with the same tender care she gave her own, told him something else entirely. He found himself explaining as much to himself as to his family that the deep-seated enmity we assume between species is often a learned behavior. At birth there is no predator or prey. There is only the desperate driving need for warmth, for milk, for the safety of a mother's touch. The truth had arrived not as a gentle dawn, but as a lightning strike illuminating a path they never knew existed. And it left them with a choice that was both impossible and unavoidable. This was no longer just a strange birth. It was a test of their compassion, their courage, and their very definition of what it means to be a family. Because the mystery of what these creatures were was solved. Now the far more difficult question was, what were they going to do about them? In the chaotic aftermath of a shocking discovery, the human mind tends to spiral. It races through 1,000 different scenarios, weighing risks, calculating consequences, and consulting a mental library of rules and fears. David, Sarah, and Leo were lost in that spiral. Their conversation became a frantic ballet of whispered questions. What do we do? Who do we call? What if they have diseases? What if they grow up and hurt the puppies? They were grappling with the laws of man, the laws of science, and the laws of fear. But while they debated, another law was being quietly and powerfully enforced in the whelping box. It was a law far older and more profound than any human could write. It was the law of a mother's heart. Sadie didn't hear their anxious whispers. She didn't understand their complex fears. Her world in that moment was beautifully instinctually simple. For her there was no dog and fox. There was only mine. With a profound sense of purpose, she began her work. She nudged one of the tiny dark-furred kits closer with her wet nose, her movements just as gentle as they were with her own golden puppies. She began to clean it, her long, warm tongue, working methodically, lovingly clearing its airways and stimulating its circulation. The kit, which had been shivering slightly, quieted under her touch, instinctively recognizing the universal language of a mother's care. David watched speechless. He had been about to suggest separating the kits, placing them in a warm box until they could figure out what to do. It was the logical, responsible thing. But as he watched Sadie, he couldn't bring himself to move. She was claiming them. Right before his eyes, she was erasing the line that nature had supposedly drawn between their species. When all 7 newborns were clean and accounted for, she curled her big warm body into a protective crescent encircling them all. The golden puppies and the dark-furred kits became a single, wriggling pile of life, all blindly seeking the same thing, the warmth and nourishment she offered. There was no hesitation. She guided the fox kits to nurse alongside her own, her body a sanctuary for all who needed it. The most telling moment came when David, wanting to check the temperature of one of the kits, slowly reached his hand toward the nest. Before his fingers could even get close, a sound rumbled up from deep within Sadie's chest. It wasn't an aggressive snarl, but a low, vibrating growl so full of protective authority that it stopped him cold. Her soft brown eyes locked onto his, and the message was unmistakable. These are my children, all of them, and you will not harm them. In that moment, David felt a profound sense of humility. He was the one with the education, the one who understood biology and animal husbandry. Yet he was being schooled by an animal whose instincts were teaching a lesson far beyond anything he'd learned in a classroom. He thought about the science of it, the flood of oxytocin, the love hormone that surges through a mother after birth, creating a powerful, non-negotiable bond. It's a chemical reaction designed to ensure survival. But watching Sadie, it felt like more than chemistry. It felt like grace. The humans had been talking about rules, risks, and what was supposed to happen. But Sadie wasn't listening. She was busy showing them that in the court of nature, there is no law higher than that of a mother's heart. It doesn't reason. It doesn't bargain. It doesn't see difference. It only loves. And as the millers stood there in stunned silence, they realized the answer to their frantic question of what do we do had already been decided for them. They were simply witnesses. When you witness something that defies all logic, the first thing you feel is isolation. You feel like you are the only person on earth to have seen such an impossible thing. For the Millers huddled in their living room, it felt as if the rules of the universe had bent just for them, just for that one night. But what they were about to discover is that what was happening with Sadie wasn't an isolated miracle. It was a beautiful, rare and powerful glitch in the matrix of nature. They weren't the first to witness it. And they wouldn't be the last. All over the world, for as long as we have been watching, nature has been showing us these grand exceptions. Think of the story of a cat in Ireland, a fiercely territorial farm cat, who after losing her own kittens was found nursing a brood of orphaned ducklings, protecting them from other animals, with a ferocity she usually reserved for her own. The ducklings, in turn, would imprint on her, following her around the farm in a perfect waddling line, their tiny chirps a stark contrast to her rumbling purr. They didn't know she was a cat. They only knew she was mother. Or consider a more dramatic, wilder example from the plains of Africa. The incredible story of Kamunyak, a lioness in Kenya, who became famous for adopting at least 6 different oryx calves over several years. An oryx is a large antelope, the natural prey of a lion. Yet this lioness defied the most fundamental instinct of a predator. She would guard the calves, starve herself, rather than hunt them and fight off other lions to protect them. Scientists were baffled. It was a complete rejection of her nature. But was it? Or was her maternal instinct simply a force more powerful than her instinct to hunt? What these stories and hundreds like them reveal is a profound biological truth. When a mother gives birth, her body is flooded with a powerful cocktail of hormones, chief among them oxytocin. We call it the love hormone, but it's more like a bonding imperative. It's a chemical command that screams nurture, protect, love what is small and helpless. And sometimes that command is so overwhelmingly powerful that it doesn't bother to check for species. It's a biological fail-safe designed to ensure that life, in whatever form it appears, will be cared for. Back in Havenwood, Ohio, David and Sarah found themselves falling down an internet rabbit hole in the quiet hours of the next day. As Sadie dozed with her mixed family, they read these stories aloud to each other, their fear slowly being replaced by a sense of awe. They weren't alone. What was happening in their living room wasn't a freak accident. It was a testament to a force of nature they were only just beginning to understand. They were part of a secret global club of witnesses to nature's most compassionate loophole. We call these events exceptions to the rule. But as the Millers looked at Sadie curled around her 7 babies, they began to wonder if maybe they had the rule wrong all along. Perhaps the rule isn't every animal for itself. Perhaps the real rule, the one that truly ensures survival, is that empathy is a universal language, spoken not in words, but in warmth and devotion. They now understood the miracle inside their home, but they were about to be brutally reminded that the world outside their door operated on a very different and far less forgiving set of rules. For a few blissful days, the Millers' house was a self-contained universe, governed only by the gentle law of a mother's love. The puppies grew stronger, their clumsy movements becoming more confident. The fox kits, surprisingly resilient, thrived under Sadie's care, their sharp, intelligent eyes beginning to open and take in the world. The line between them blurred. They were a single, tangled pile of fur, a family stitched together by a miracle. The Millers guarded their secret fiercely, knowing that the fragile piece they had found was too precious, too strange to survive the judgment of the outside world. But secrets, especially in a small town like Havenwood, have a way of getting out. The catalyst wasn't malicious. It came in the form of their neighbor, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, whose prize-winning roses bordered their property. One sunny afternoon she was tending to her garden when she saw a flash of reddish-brown fur dart across the miller's lawn, followed by another. She squinted. They were too small to be dogs, and they moved with a wild, nimble grace. To her the conclusion was simple and alarming. The millers had a fox infestation. Worried for their safety and the safety of her own small poodle, she did what any concerned neighbor would do. She picked up the phone and called animal control. The arrival of the white truck sent a jolt of ice-cold dread through the family. The man who stepped out was named Mr. Henderson. He wasn't a villain. In fact, he had a kind, tired face and a gentle demeanor. But in his hands he carried a standard-issue animal crate, and that crate represented a threat more terrifying than any predator. Mr. Henderson was a man who lived by the book, and the book in the state of Ohio was unequivocally clear: wild animals cannot be rehabilitated by private citizens. They cannot be kept as pets. He listened patiently to their frantic, unbelievable story. He looked into the whelping box and saw the impossible sight for himself. He even admitted he'd never seen anything like it. But his job wasn't to marvel at miracles. His job was to enforce the rules. "I understand what you're saying," he said, his voice full of a weary sympathy that made it all the more heartbreaking. "But they are wild animals. As soon as they start to wean, their instincts will kick in. It's not safe for them, for your dog or for you. I have to take them to a state facility." The word facility hung in the air, cold and sterile. It was a place of cages and concrete, a place where their fate would be uncertain. A tense standoff began in the middle of the living room. David argued from a place of veterinary knowledge, explaining they were too young to be separated. Sarah pleaded from the heart, describing the powerful bond Sadie had formed. But it was Leo who delivered the most powerful argument. As Mr. Henderson took a step toward the nest, the 10-year-old boy, his face streaked with tears, planted himself directly in the warden's path. He spread his arms wide, a small, defiant soldier protecting his family. "You can't," he choked out, his voice trembling but firm. "You can't break up a family." The warden stopped. For a long moment he looked from the boy's tear-filled eyes to the protective mother dog and her impossible litter. Something in him softened. He sighed, running a hand over his face. "Listen," he said, his voice lower. "I'll give you a chance. You find a state-licensed wildlife rehabilitator who will agree to take them. You have 48 hours. If you can't, I have to come back with a warrant. I don't want to, but I will." The front door closed, leaving the Millers in a stunned, terrifying silence. The greatest test of love, they were now learning, isn't just accepting the unexpected. It's defending it from a world that doesn't, and perhaps can't understand. They were no longer just caregivers, they were protectors. And the clock was now ticking. 48 hours. To a world that moves at the speed of light, it's a blink of an eye. But to the Miller family, it was a lifetime. A frantic, desperate race against a ticking clock began. The peace and wonder that had filled their home were replaced by the sharp, metallic taste of fear. David practically lived on the phone, his voice growing hoarse as he called every contact he had, every sanctuary, every wildlife rehabilitator in a 500-mile radius. The responses were a crushing litany of rejections. "We're full. We don't have the resources for kits that young. Foxes are notoriously difficult." With every no, their hope dwindled. They watched Sadie, oblivious to the deadline hanging over her, tend to her impossible family, with a devotion that made their hearts ache. How could they explain to her that the world of humans, with its cold, hard rules, was about to tear her family apart? Just as despair began to set in, a single thread of hope appeared. A small, family-run wildlife sanctuary, nestled in the rolling hills 2 hours away, answered the call. The owner, a woman named Eleanor, with a voice as warm and weathered as old leather, listened to the entire unbelievable story without interruption. When David finished, there was a long pause. Then she said the words that felt like a prayer being answered, "Bring them to me. We'll make room." Eleanor became their lifeline. She guided them on how to supplement the kids' feeding, ensuring they got the right nutrients that Sadie's milk couldn't fully provide. The family worked together, a well-oiled machine driven by a single purpose. Sarah and David would gently separate a kit, and Leo would sit by Sadie's head, stroking her fur and distracting her with soft words, assuring her that her baby would be right back. But the day they could no longer postpone finally arrived. The day of the separation. It was a day cloaked in a heavy, unnatural silence. Eleanor arrived, her presence calm and reassuring, but it did little to ease the family's pain. The process was heartbreakingly gentle. One by one they lifted the fox kits from the nest. The kits, now with their eyes wide open, let out small confused cries. But the most gut-wrenching sound came from Sadie. She rose to her feet, whining, pacing, nudging her head toward the carrier that held her adopted children. She didn't understand. Her eyes, filled with a deep, mournful confusion, darted from David to Sarah to Leo, asking a question they could not answer. They knelt beside her, wrapping their arms around her, their own tears soaking into her golden fur. They were doing the right thing, the only thing they could do, but it felt like a betrayal. The story, however, doesn't end with goodbye. It ends with a new beginning. The Millers didn't just walk away. They became dedicated volunteers at the sanctuary, making the 2-hour drive every single weekend. They watched the kits grow from tiny, helpless babies into strong, sleek, and clever young foxes. Sadie would come with them, and in a special supervised enclosure, she would get to see her adopted children, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. Their story rippled through the town of Havenwood. Mr. Henderson, the warden, even stopped by one day, not with a warrant, but with a donation for the sanctuary, admitting he'd learned something about rules and when they needed to be bent. The community, moved by the tale of the golden retriever, who became a mother to foxes, held a fundraiser that kept the sanctuary running for an entire year. Months later, on a cool autumn afternoon, the Miller family sat on their porch. Sadie's puppies, now boisterous and leggy young dogs, tumbled in the fallen leaves. In David's hand was a phone playing a video Eleanor had sent them. It showed 3 beautiful, healthy foxes, their coats a fiery red, being released at the edge of a vast protected woodland. They hesitated for a moment, then disappeared into the trees, returning to the wild world where they belonged. Sadie rested her head on Leo's lap, watching the screen. She didn't know the science or the law. She only knew that she had loved them, she had protected them, and she had given them their chance. Family, the Millers had learned, isn't defined by blood or fur or species. It's defined by love, courage, and the absolute refusal to give up on each other. It's defined by the willingness to fight for the family you choose. Wasn't that an incredible journey? The story of Sadie and her impossible family is a powerful reminder that the instinct to love and protect is one of the most beautiful forces on our planet. It shows us that compassion knows no boundaries. And now we want to hear from you. What part of this story touched you the most? Have you ever witnessed an incredible act of kindness in the animal kingdom? Let us know in the comments below. Your stories and your passion are what make this community so special. If you were moved by this story and want to hear more incredible tales of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bonds between animals and the people who love them, please take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell. It truly helps us continue to find and share these amazing stories with the world. Thank you for being here with us. And remember, always look for the helpers. Sometimes they have 4 paws and a heart of gold.